Your point about entitlement spending overall, again, that is just simply the big driver of the debt. If you look at any budget pie chart you want to look at, that's where most of the money is in Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, food stamps, farm programs. So there's a lot of entitlement spending. The discretionary part of the budget has been really for decades, and honestly, we ought to, again, what's the old Willie Sutton line? Go, if you rob banks, because that's where the money is. Well, entitlement reform is where ultimately you're going to achieve balance in the budget.
Congressman, a tweet for you from one of our viewers who calls themselves JAH08. Lifetime costs for the Iraq and Afghanistan wounded and families has been estimated at $2 trillion.
Well, of course, that's true. It's a very expensive war. Now, two questions. Why did we go? Because we were attacked from Afghanistan. That's where al-Qaeda operated from. That's where Osama bin Laden had dozens of terrorist training camps. They had a government there that protected them. 3,000 Americans were killed on American soil. Interestingly enough, that's a war that the president has supported and expanded. President tripled the number of troops in Afghanistan. Most of the casualties there, by the way, have occurred on his watch. I'm not being critical of him for that, but the idea that somehow the president hasn't been deeply involved in Afghanistan policy is just fanciful. Actually, you can be critical of Bush, but again, that was a policy that was brought before the Congress. Both parties supported going to Afghanistan overwhelmingly, including our current Secretary of State, including the President of the United States. And again, initially in his first term, he expanded it. There are more troops today, more than twice as many troops in Afghanistan today than there were the day that George Bush left office. So again, I don't question that. I think both presidents felt we had a compelling national interest in making sure an area that we had been attacked from was cleaned out and that there was a government in place that could at least secure the territory and make sure that didn't happen again. It's been an expensive and hard endeavor. We've got a lot of service people that have paid the ultimate sacrifice for it, but I think it's actually been a war that's been waged in American interest, and it's been bipartisan.
We'll go to Kara next in Alexandria. A Democratic caller.
Hi, good morning. I have a comment and I have a question. I think the problem is the Republican Party is basically working towards upkeeping with their ideology, no matter who in the process gets hurt. And secondly, I think they even have publicly acknowledged this, was the first term of Obama, they wanted to make sure that he would be a one-term president. And they've done everything in their power to make sure that he's not going to be successful. And now that he won a second term, it's kind of like the same thing again. Well, now we couldn't get him to be a first-term president. We're going to make sure he does not have a good legacy as a president. So in the process, American people are being held hostage.
Okay, Carol, let's get a response from Republican Tom Cole.
Well, look, first of all, I never made a statement like that, and I'm sure your caller wouldn't accept responsibility for every statement that any Democrat made any more than I would a Republican. And honestly, I've worked with the president on the fiscal cliff, on violence against women, on hurricane relief to Sandy. I've got 2 bill signings in my office on Native American issues where I have to say the president has an excellent record. I'm a tribal member myself, and so been very proud of his record in that area. And look, politics is a contentious business. It's not as if Democrats helped George Bush, and he had a pretty tough reelection. He had a very difficult second term. Democrats, refused to work with him on everything from Social Security reform to immigration. So, I'd like to, take that contention out of American politics, but it's there. It's a fact of life. People hold strongly differing positions. The miracle here is that at the end of the day, we do get things done. There are serious debates. This whole system, was designed to be tough to operate. Madison would be very proud if we could come back and look at it. And then we've added the extra difficulty of, number one, partisan divisions in a way that he did when he helped put together the Constitution. And right now we have divided government on top of that. So it's like a Rubik's Cube. It's hard to line everything up. But sometimes you can, and you get things done. The country moves on. That's what I'm going to continue to try and work on.
All right, Stephen in Windham, Connecticut, Independent.
Hey, thanks for taking my call, gentleman and lady. I read General Martin Dempsey's presentation in front of the Senate Arms Committee. It talks about the moral dilemma of this sequestration, where eventually we're going to ask these fellas and ladies to go into battle, unready and ill-equipped. Could you address the moral dilemma of sequestration?
I absolutely can. Look, my dad was career military. I've got two of the largest military installations in the country in my district. Tinker Air Force Base, which is the largest air logistics center, and Fort Sill, which is the home of the field artillery. And believe me, we have plenty of people at both installations that have been deployed repeatedly, not to mention our own National Guard, and that's common around the country. So I take that very seriously. I used to sit on the House Armed Services Committee for 6 years. I sit on the Defense Appropriation Committee right now. General Dempsey is a great American soldier. First met him when he was commander of the 1st Armored Division in Baghdad in October of 2003, and have followed what's been a brilliant career ever since then. And I think he's being very honest with the American people about what the stakes are. Now, we can avoid this. We can do this much more logically. We don't have to cut the military in the way that sequestration's set up. That's why Republicans acted twice. They acted in May and December, passed legislation that would have protected the military from most of these cuts. The Senate just never put a bill on the floor. I think they're now trying to rouse themselves to action. They'll finally do it. We've known this was coming for over 2 years. The president has not put a proposal on the board. Sequestration was originally his suggestion to put teeth in the budget agreement. And so, if you propose this particular solution, and it was accepted by all parties in good faith, you ought to at least put a specific plan on the table. The president is the commander-in-chief. He's not in the White House today calling Republicans and Democrats together around the table. He's in Asheville, North Carolina, campaigning. So, it's hard to know how serious he is when he doesn't have a specific plan himself, and he's not urged his party to produce one. We've done that. Now, do I expect Democrats to agree with our plan? No. That's fair enough, but at least pass one of your own or propose one of your own. We'll have a basis for negotiation. So far, the president hasn't done it. One last point. Again, the president just got more than enough revenue to cover all the sequestration cuts for the military. That's what occurred in the fiscal cliff deal. We ought to now, he likes to talk about a balanced approach. There were no cuts in any areas of government spending in January when that revenue was voted through. I voted for it, worked with the president on that. Seems to me it's now his turn to come up with a list of specific cuts, and we ought to have a, no revenue deal. Cuts this time, we had revenue last time. Then let's sit down and work this out going forward. But you make an excellent point about the risk involved here. And,
Congressman? About that point from the caller, Oklahoma has several military bases in the state, and Politico reported that the Oklahoma Commerce Department says it provides more than 133,000 jobs, a gross domestic product impact of about $9.6 billion for the state, and as much as 7% of the state's entire economy. So if sequestration happens, what does that mean for those numbers that I just put out there?
It's extraordinarily difficult. Look, and most of that is more of it's in my district than any other part of the state. So I know the numbers intimately. It's an enormous part of our economy. And frankly, we are exceptionally proud to host the American military. There's enormous support for it in Oklahoma. Tinker Air Force Base alone has 15,000 civilian workers. Fort Sill, about another 6,000. And that doesn't mention, there is, by the way, a non-defense part of this. About half these cuts are coming out of discretionary programs. We also have Kerr Labs in Ada, Oklahoma, and the National Severe Storm Center in the University of Oklahoma. We train most of the flight control people in America at the FFA Center in Oklahoma City. So believe me, I understand the economic consequences of what we're talking about. There's also economic consequences without dealing with a budget deficit. The president has had 4 $1 trillion deficits in a row. He's racked up more debt in 4 years by far than, or considerably, than George Bush did in 8, and more than any president in American history. Now, it's time to get serious about dealing with that. We've made some progress in the last few years. It's been like pulling teeth. Again, we just had a fiscal cliff deal. He got some revenue. Asking him now to deal with this part of the equation in spending cuts in a government that's going to spend over $44 trillion in the next 10 years finding $1.2 trillion in spending cuts as opposed to increasing taxes again is not too much to ask. But, you know, the president has been reluctant to put a plan on the table. Same thing's true with our friends in the Senate. They haven't even written a budget in 4 years. So, you know, believe me, in my view, the Democrats have been extraordinarily irresponsible in terms of taxing and spending.
Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, member of the Appropriations and Budget Committees. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we'll talk to Marcy